Please raise the profile of this within the church. From Kirby Misperton, Frack-free Rydale, please give a warm welcome to the very much loved Bishop Graham Cray.
As you heard, I'm from Frack-free Rydale, and my wife and I live in Kirby Misperton. We live half a mile from the KM8 site. 900 HGVs and 500 other traffic movements for just one frack are meant to pass our front door. So you may notice I've got a personal interest. But my objections to fracking are based on much more than local disruption. They were shaped by 2 visits overseas last year. My wife and I went to visit the Anglican Church in South Sudan, the youngest nation in the world. Wonderful people working for peace in a broken country. But rainfalls have decreased by 10 to 20%, and temperatures have increased by more than a degree since, guess what, the middle of the 1970s. The area we visited was barren, but it had been forest 20 years ago. Climate change through our greenhouse gases is already disproportionately affecting the poorest people in the world. And then in September I was lecturing in Pennsylvania, and I took evidence of the impact on fracking on communities from 3 different counties. I was told there's no plant fence around this industry, and the only geography they care about is underground. And I'm at a local church providing 30 families for 2 years with the only water that's safe for them to drink. And these visits raised huge concerns. This is a moral issue. Climate change has been called the slow catastrophe. For scientists, it's uncontroversial. For some politicians, it's highly inconvenient. And Christians share with the adherents of many faiths that we are answerable to the Creator for the way we treat creation. That the planet is a gift, not a possession to use as we wish. And leaders of all major denominations and faiths in the UK, all the faiths signed the Lambeth Declaration on Climate Change, saying we have a responsibility to act now for ourselves, our neighbours, and for future generations. And for people of faith, there's an inseparable link between love of God and love of neighbour. So who's my neighbour when it comes to fracking? To whom do I have a moral responsibility to help? Well, my neighbours, as I've said, are the poorest of the earth. As climate change continues, it's the poorest in our world who will suffer most. Many of the poorest countries are already experiencing the impact of our carbon emissions. It will get worse because there's a delay in the system, and there is no moral basis for developing another fossil fuel. For the sake of the poor of the earth, we need to keep the shale gas in the ground. But climate change doesn't just stay in far-off lands, it comes home. So my neighbours are our future generations. Gases emitted now will cause atmospheric changes for up to 50 years. Climate change affects the poorest now. In 50 years, it will affect everyone. Our energy choices shape what sort of world we pass on to our children. I spoke to our postmistress in our village. She said, I'm not so worried about us, but I'm really worried for our children. For our children and grandchildren's sake, we need to keep the shale gas in the ground. My last neighbours are Rydale, Rossiter, Preston Road and the other communities where fracking is proposed. Fracking is contrary to the long-term well-being of any community where it takes place. There's environmental damage. The UN Alert on Fracking warns of unavoidable environmental damage. It is the nature of the process to harm the local environment. There is loss of jobs and long-term prosperity. The area where I live gets its prosperity from tourism, agriculture and food. But who goes sightseeing in a gas field? In Australia, the government of Victoria has banned fracking because it looked across at what happened in the state of Queensland, where for every 10 new jobs created by fracking, 18 were lost in agriculture. And most significant, other people have mentioned it, are the health impacts. Since 2013 in the USA, there's been a stream of public health research reports raising serious concerns about the consequences of fracking for public health. It goes from nosebleeds to cancer to premature births. So a few weeks ago, the 16,000-strong Pennsylvania Medical Society called for an immediate moratorium in the state on new shale drilling and hydraulic fracturing because of the dire medical consequences. Pennsylvania's doctors are saying stop. And our greatest concern is the sheer scale of what is planned. Our village's experience is to be multiplied many times. The latest round of exploration licenses cover more than 200 communities in North Yorkshire. So how many wells? How many lorries? How much water? How much wastewater to be decontaminated, and what capacity to do it? We would be undermining the long-term prosperity of many communities for dubious short-term energy gains that endanger the world. So for the sake of our local communities, we need to keep the shale gas in the ground. Fracking is not for the common good. It has no social license. And if it is imposed on unwilling communities, democracy will be further undermined. It's based on the ethics of the quick fix, not of the long-term well-being of community, nation or world. There are two forms of immorality: doing what is wrong and doing nothing about what you know to be wrong. The greatest moral threat is blindness to the possibility of a better way. If we use shale gas and other fossil fuels to try to sustain our current way of life, all we will do is degrade it. Carbon emissions have no mercy. But we have the God-given ingenuity and creativity to create a better, more sustainable way of life, more in tune with the limits of our planetary home. I'm going to quote Lord Sachs. The great faiths teach a different kind of wisdom. Reverence in the face of creation, responsibility to future generations, and restraint in the knowledge that not everything we can do, we should do. The fact that we can extract shale gas is no moral reason for doing it. I oppose fracking for the sake of my neighbours and in favour of a better way of life. Because to borrow a title from the Pet Shop Boys, fracking, it's a sin. Thank you.
Thank you so much.